So thanks everybody for coming. I know there are a lot of strikes going on in Paris, so I'm glad you guys were able to make it. I'm glad I was able to make it and there weren't any issues. Today we're going to talk about something that I am extremely passionate about, and that is this idea of the employee experience. Years ago when I graduated college, I got a dual degree in business management, economics, and psychology. And when I graduated, I went to my first job. And when I interviewed for this company, they said, you're going to do all these wonderful things. You're going to travel across the country. You're going to interview executives. You're going to love this job. And I thought, okay, perfect. This is the type of job I want. And a couple months into my job, I was doing data entry, cold calling, PowerPoint presentations. And then one day, the CEO comes out of his office. He hands me $10. And he says, Jacob, I have a very important job for you. And I said, yeah, what is it? And he said, here's $10. I want you to go to Starbucks, get me a cup of coffee, and get something for yourself too. And I thought, great, this is why I went to college. So I just lost my mind and I said, you go get your own damn cup of coffee. I didn't go to school to get you coffee. That's what I said on the inside. On the outside, I said, sure, I would love to go get you that cup of coffee. And ever since then, I've become fascinated with this idea of employee experience and how the workplace is changing. One of the things that I do is I run something called the Future of Work Community, which is a collection of around 70 organizations from around the world, and their senior leaders that are part of this community. And they share what they're working on, what they're thinking, what their challenges are, where they see the future of work going. And so they share this with me, and then I, in turn, get to share this with audiences such as yourself. So, of course, I have to recognize these organizations and say thank you to them for sharing what they share with me. Now, before we talk about employee experience, we first have to understand, well, what is experience? So, a quick show of hands, how many people in the last 12 months have spent time or money on creating a personal experience for yourself? Past 12 months. How many people? Okay, pretty much everybody. High hands. I know it's late. We got to do high hands. Okay? How many people have spent time or money in the past 6 months on creating a good experience for yourself? Okay, pretty much everybody. What about the past 3 months? Past 1 month? 1 week? 24 hours? A couple of people. Oh my goodness. So clearly, we care about experience. It's something that we all value. It's something that we care about. We're willing to spend our own time, our money, our resources on creating good experiences for ourselves. But why is this so important? When you think about experience, it falls into this kind of a linear path. We start with some kind of an event, something like this, a conference. It could be anything, some sort of a thing. From that event, we get the experience. From that experience, we get a feeling. And from that feeling, we get a memory. And that memory helps us decide if we want to have a relationship with a company, with a manager, or with another employee. So experiences are crucial because they help shape our decisions around who we want to have relationships with and who we don't want to have relationships with. And what this means is that experience is a very human thing. Right? I mean, I ask you guys, and you guys all said that you care about experiences. You all spend time and money on creating good experiences for yourself. So experience is a very human thing. So then my question is, well then, what happened to the experience at work? Why is it that we care about experience so much in our personal lives, but then when you go to work, it seems like experience is gone? And if experience is a human thing, then we can say, where is the humanity inside of our organizations? Where is what makes us human inside of our organizations? I think it's missing. I think that piece is fundamentally missing. And I'll give you some evidence of that. So when I was writing my book on the future of work, I thought it would be interesting to look up synonyms for words that we use every day to describe work. So what I'm going to show you now is the actual definition from the dictionary for these words, followed by synonyms from the dictionary for these words. So let's start off with the word manager. Someone who controls all or part of a company. Synonym for the word manager is slave driver, boss, and zookeeper. Zookeeper is my favorite one, because employees are just animals that we're all herding together, right? So this is what we think of, or what most of us think of when we think of a stereotypical, a typical manager. We think of a slave driver, we think of a zookeeper. Now, what about the word employee? Employee, a person working for another person or business for pay, cog, servant, slave. Again, I can't make this stuff up. This is actually what you will find if you open up the dictionary to look up the word employee. Now, what about the word work? What is work? Activity in which one exerts strengths or faculties to do or perform something. Daily grind, drudgery, struggle. How unfortunate is that we have to refer to work as something that we actually have to struggle through? Now, when you put these three things together, basically we're all cogs working for a slave driver as we go about our daily drudgery or struggle. Now, I don't know about you, but when I see something like that, you basically just think, wow, work sucks. Right? I mean, you can't be optimistic and happy about something like this. Yet, interestingly enough, this is how we have built our organizations for the past 10, 50, 100, 150 years. On top of these ideas that managers are slave drivers, that employees are expendable, and that work has to suck. Right? That is how we have built our organizations over the past 10, 50, 100, 150 years. On top of those assumptions. When I think of the employee experience, and this is a topic of a book that I have that's going to come out next year in March. So I'm doing a lot of research on this now. I'm doing a big survey on it. I'm doing a lot of interviews to try to understand what is employee experience and how do we create it. And the one thing that I have found so far around employee experience is that the assumption we have always had about our organizations is now wrong. We have always assumed that people need to work inside of our organizations. We've always assumed that if I'm the company and I have a job, that you need the job. And because you need the job, you're going to come work for me. And that's been the relationship that we have always had. But look at the world that we live in today. People are becoming Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. They are renting out their houses on Airbnb. They're living at home with their parents longer because they're being pickier about the jobs they go for. They are creating profiles online on Upwork or freelancer.com. They sell things on Etsy. I mean, we're doing all sorts of different things now. Not only that, but the war for talent has never been more fierce. In fact, I'm willing to bet that a lot of you guys in this room get messages from LinkedIn recruiters that want you to interview for another company. Right? We all get those types of recruiting messages for other companies. So why do we stay at our current companies and not jump ship and go to another? Right? The war for talent has never been more fierce than it is today. So what is experience? It's this idea that we have to shift from creating an environment where we assume people need to work there to creating an environment where people want to work there. It's this idea of shifting from creating an organization that's focused on utility, the bare bones, essential elements of what you need to get your job done, to experience. To how do we go above and beyond? Now, let's be real with each other for a minute. When most people think of HR, they don't have nice things to say. I mean, most people think HR sucks. Most people think HR is boring. Most people think HR is outdated. Most people think HR is where you go when you're going to get hired or fired or if you're in trouble. Right? That's what most people think of HR. I mean, HR is, by all accounts, a part of the organization that many people don't like. But I'm one of the few people that believe that HR is actually one of the most exciting functions and roles that we have inside of our organizations today. When I tell people that, they think I'm crazy. They say, HR? What are you, nuts? Nobody likes HR. But I think HR is at a very pivotal point where it is now going to help lead and shape and drive the future of work for a lot of organizations. And it's precisely because of this idea. I think HR is now really helping shape and create employee experiences. And that's a big part of the future of work. Now, I'm still working on my research data, so I don't have my numbers to show with you yet, but there are some other studies out there. This one is from Glassdoor, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And there are a lot of organizations out there that look at best places to work, great places to work. They look at employee engagement. I'm of the firm belief that employee engagement is going to disappear and is going to be replaced by employee experience. But for now, let's talk a little bit about engagement. So in this chart, Glassdoor looked at all the companies that were ranked as best places to work, and they compared them to companies that were not on the list. So the top 3 arrows, the top 3 lines on there, are different types of best places to work. The black line is the S&P 500. And you can see that organizations that are ranked as best places to work consistently outperform those that are not. So clearly there is something going on here. And when we think about employee experience, we also have to remember that this impacts the customer. This isn't just about the employee. Today we live in a world where we're talking about robots and automation and jobs getting replaced, and a lot of the work or a lot of the things, a lot of the organizations that we interact with it's a very linear process, right? You go to a bank, it's the same thing every time. You go to a grocery store, it's the same thing every time. A restaurant, same thing. So if everything is always the same thing at these various places that you frequent, what is it that allows some organizations to create amazing customer experiences and other organizations to create poor customer experiences? The answer is that organizations that focus on employee experience have better customer experience. Because if your employees feel like they are being treated well, they will want to treat your customers well. So when you think about employee experience, don't just think about it in terms of it's good for my employees. It's also very good for your customers. Now, a couple nights ago, I was watching a show on TV, and there was a commercial that came on. And during the commercial, they were talking about this drug. And they were talking about some of the side effects of this drug. And the side effects were bleeding from the eyes, weight loss, depression, skin discoloration, and in some cases, you could die. And I was looking at this commercial, and I started laughing because I thought, who the hell would take this kind of a drug? Right? Nobody. Nobody would take this kind of a drug. But then I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, well, that's interesting because a lot of us work at or create organizations that have the same type of side effects. A lot of us work at organizations where the side effects include weight loss or weight gain, arguments with your spouse, hair loss, bleeding from the eyes, and in some cases you might die from working. So it's funny because we won't take the pill, but we'll work for that type of an organization, or we will create that type of an organization. Why is that the case? One of the things that I always tell executives when I meet with them is I say, if I were to condense your corporate culture and what it's like to work at your organization into a pill, and I gave you that pill right now to take, would you swallow it? Most of the time the executives say, nope. I wouldn't swallow it. So if you as an executive aren't willing to take your organization's pill, why would anybody else? Why would your employees? The answer is they wouldn't, and they shouldn't. Now, psychologists have identified 2 types of thinking, System 1 and System 2 thinking. System 1 thinking is very autonomous. It's instant. So, for example, if I were to say 1 + 1 is 2 + 2 is 4, right? You don't have to think about it. You just know the answer. It comes to you instantly. That's System 1 type of thinking. And that's oftentimes how we think about employee experience. We don't really think about it. We don't plan it. We don't design it. We just kind of like, yeah, we do this, we do that, that's fine. But then psychologists have another way of thinking called System 2 type thinking. System 2 type thinking is purposeful. It's designed. You have to take a step back to think about things. So I'll give you an example. It's called the racket and ball problem. If you know the answer, don't shout it out. A racket and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The racket costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Now again, don't shout out the answer if you know it. How many people think the ball costs $1? How many people think the ball costs a quarter? How many people think the ball costs 10 cents? Okay, quite a few of you. The answer is actually 5 cents. The ball costs 5 cents. It's something that more people would realize if they took a step back, looked at it, and thought about it for a minute. And this is exactly how we need to think about and design employee experiences. We have to take a step back. We have to think of System 2 type of experiences, not System 1 type of experiences. Now, the good thing for all organizations, for everybody sitting in this room, is that there are only 3 things you need to do, or 3 environments you need to focus on to create an amazing employee experience. Culture, technology, physical space. That's it. Culture, technology, physical space, employee experience. So what do these 3 things actually look like? The first one is the physical space. This is the art that hangs on the wall, the catered meals that you might have, the dogs that might be running into the office, the cubicles, the open floor plan, the people that are around you. This is the environment that you can see and touch and taste, right? That is the physical environment. And there's no secret for why we want to work in a desirable physical environment, because we want to be engaged. So the physical environment is the first environment that we need to think about. Now, for this research project that I'm doing, I'm trying to come up with a series of questions that I can ask any organization to figure out if they are creating great employee experiences. So I'm going to share with you some of the questions that you should be asking yourselves internally. Number 1, do you offer multiple modes of working? Not just an open floor plan or a closed floor plan, but multiple modes of working. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different floor plans. Another question that you should ask yourself that's not on this list is, does the physical environment reflect the values of the organization? If your values are trust and fun and transparency and engagement, is that reflected in the physical environment that your employees actually sit in? The second environment is culture. Unlike the physical environment, the cultural environment is the one that you actually feel. Right? This is the vibe that you get from working for this particular organization. And culture is impacted by many things. Organizational style, leadership approach. Is it command and control, or is it more believing in collective intelligence? Is it a hierarchy, or is it a little bit of a flatter structure? So a couple of things that you should ask yourself to determine if you have a great corporate culture. Do employees feel a sense of purpose? This is a common question we always ask, but unfortunately, most organizations stop after they find out if employees have a sense of purpose. In total, there are around 6 questions that I think you should ask. These are 3 of them. Employees have a sense of purpose. Do they feel valued? And do they feel like they are being treated fairly? And this would be on a scale of 1 to 5. So on a scale of 1 to 5, do you feel like you are valued? Do you feel like you're being treated fairly? Do you feel like you have a sense of purpose? Don't just stop when you find out about purpose. The third environment is the technological environment. I saw a tweet that said API is part of the employee experience. Absolutely. APIs, apps, mobile devices, software, hardware, the devices that you use, the user experience, user interface, digital transformation, all of these things are a part of the technological environment. And that's because we all want to use tools that reflect the year that we live in. We live in 2016. We shouldn't have to use technology that looks like it's from the 80s or 90s. That doesn't make any sense. So a couple questions you should ask yourself around technology. Is it consumer grade? Not enterprise grade, consumer grade. What do I mean by consumer grade? Are the technologies so good, so beautiful, and so useful that you would consider using something similar in your personal life if it existed. That is consumer grade. This is why so many technologies today are built and modeled after Twitter and Facebook and Google. They're trying to be consumer grade. Forget the enterprise. Focus on consumer grade technologies. The second question to ask, is the technology available to everybody or just a couple people? And the last question, is the technology focused on employee needs or business requirements? Business requirements means that you have a checklist, you go down the checklist. That's like if I were to ask you, you want a car? What do you want in a car? And you said, well, I want air conditioning, I want a steering wheel, I want 4 tires, I want a roof, and it's got to be red. And I said, okay, if I go build you something that has 4 tires on the roof, the steering wheel on the bottom of the car, and it's painted red, and I say, here's your car, you'd say, what the hell is that? I'd say, it's a car, that's what you wanted. You'd say, I can't use that. Right? That's the difference between focusing on business needs or employee needs and business requirements. You have to understand how and why employees are working. I want to give you a couple examples of organizations that are doing interesting things. And I also want to encourage you to come share with me any stories and examples you might have of European companies that are doing interesting things around employee experience. Because I'll be honest, I had a hard time finding great examples of European companies that are focusing on employee experience. So I would love to hear from you guys after the session's over. What are some cool companies doing in Europe to focus on employee experience? The first one, Airbnb. At Airbnb, they believe they have this value that you belong anywhere. Their conference rooms are modeled after Airbnb listings. They treat their physical space like software. They build up new things, they tear things down, they iterate, they test, they design, they develop. That's what I mean by treating your physical space like software. They have cycles where they keep testing and iterating and experimenting. That's crucial for all of us. It's crucial when you think about the physical space. Next organization is Cisco. Cisco's been doing tremendous things, getting rid of their annual employee review program, switching it for something else. They've been hacking into HR. And they've been building technologically advanced offices that know who you are. So if you show up to work, the lighting, the temperature, your contact information automatically gets beamed down to whatever device or desk you are using. They don't have any assigned desks. They are experimenting, they are thinking with all sorts of interesting things. They believe in workplace flexibility and autonomy. Right? That's focusing on the employee experience. Another organization doing interesting things is Whirlpool. These guys make dishwashers and toasters and blenders and washing machines. That's not cool. Yet somehow this organization is doing an amazing job of focusing on employee experience. They got rid of all of their managerial rankings. For 80,000 people, you now have only one of 4 different types of titles at the company. That's it, one of 4. They got rid of all of their old legacy technology and switched over to something modern. They're spending millions of dollars to redesign their spaces. Right? They're doing a lot of really cool things. And again, these guys build washers and dryers. This isn't really a modern tech company the way that we would think of. So what does this actually mean? Well, there are a couple types of organizations that are emerging when we think about this. The first, empowered organizations. Empowered organizations focus on technology and culture. Then we have engaged organizations. Engaged organizations focus on culture and the physical space. And then the third category of organization is enabled. Enabled organizations focus on technology and physical space. But today we're starting to see a fourth type of an organization emerge. This is the organization that's going to be able to attract and retain top talent. This is the organization that's going to dominate the future of work. That's the experiential organization. That's the one that sits in the middle of all of this. To do that, you simply have to focus on what I call the employee experience equation. Culture plus technology plus physical space equals employee experience. Ultimately, this is what we're trying to build. A continuous relationship between the organization and the employees, where you test out ideas, you launch them, employees give you feedback, you extract insight, you analyze it, you get data, and you redesign again. And it's never ending back and forth. employee experience isn't just an end point, it is a continuous, never-ending journey. It's a process that we have to create inside of our organizations. And focusing on culture, technology, and physical space is the way to do that. A big part of designing employee experience is also transparency. Right? You can't implement every idea that employees have, so what do? You become transparent with them. Let them know what you're working on, what's not working, what is working. That level of transparency allows employees to understand what you as an organization are doing, what's working, what's not, and they are okay with not having every idea being implemented. So be as transparent as you can inside of your organizations when you think about employee experience. So I want to leave you with one sort of parting image that if I can encourage you to think about it would be this. Think of your organizations more like laboratories and less like factories. Right? Think of your organization like a laboratory that experiments, that tests, that encourages, that mentors, and less like a factory that's all about step 1, step 2, step 3, about process, about everybody doing the same thing. That's not experience. And it's one of the reasons why I was so excited when Alex talked about experience during his talk. Right? Because it's a big shift that we're starting to see for organizations around the world, this focus on experience. So how can your organization be like a lab and less like a laboratory? And I'll leave you with this last question. What do you think the world would look like if every organization focused on designing and creating employee experiences? What do you think your organization would look like if it focused on designing and creating employee experiences? And ask yourself, wouldn't you want to work at that type of an organization? Thank you.